So I was in the right orthographic view. So I'm going to rotate out of that view. So with my 3-button mouse, if you have any other configuration, I have videos on how you can use the trackpad, but I'm going to be concentrating on the instruction for the 3-button mouse. So I have the middle mouse button. I'm clicking down and holding and orbiting out of that orthographic view. And then I'm going to go over here to the left to our move tool, and I'm just going to kind of move it out of the way. So if I go back to 3, I'm going to want to use, since this is the right orthographic, I'm going to use this view for the side of the chair. So something that you will want to do is eyeball the center, which is kind of going to be moot because I'm going to actually scale this in a second. But you want to try to center the side view so that you can keep your cube or your objects as close to 0, 0, 0, which is the origin as possible. And I'll just kind of continue so that I can kind of circle back to this. So I'm going to press 1 to go to the front. And I'm actually going to import the reference image again because I want to use the reference image for the side of the chair, and then I want to use the reference image for the front of the chair. And so this is how you can kind of use the reference images at the same time and get more accuracy. So again, I'm going to go to Shift A, image right here, choose the reference, and bring that image in again. And so now it's in my front view. And then I'm going to middle mouse click, hold down to orbit out. And then I'm just going to move this out of the way. You don't want to keep it in the center because it'll be in the way of your modeling. So you just kind of move it out of your way. And I just want to make this a little bit bigger. So I have this reference image selected, and then I'm going to shift select this reference image, and I'm just going to press S. I don't want to do these at the same time, actually. I'm going to just do this at one at a time. So I'm going to have to be more precise. So I'm going to do S2. Or do I want to do 3? I'm going to just do 2. And then I'm going to do S2. So you can be very specific with how much you scale. You don't have to do it randomly. Anytime you press G for grab or R for rotate or S, you can immediately follow it by a number and it'll be more precise. So if you want to rotate, for example, if I wanted to R90, or actually you have to do RX90. So for rotation, it's actually for all of them. If you just want to generally do it, then you can just put a number, but for specific axes, if you want to rotate around, this is the x-axis. If you want to rotate around the x-axis, you press R for rotate, and then the axis you want to rotate around, and then the number you want to rotate. So let's see. So if I press 3, you see, because I scaled it, you see this blue line.
Excuse me, Miss Anderson.
Yes.
You say R. You say R for rotate. X is the axis, or X, what is the X stand for?
X as in extra. I can't remember the actual what's the
but
the
you
actual
have to,
military
you have
thing.
to type X and then the how many degree you want to turn, right?
Yeah, if you want to rotate around the x-axis. So if I do, this is RX90, and then now I'm doing Control Z just to take it back.
Let's try 15. Let's try 15 to see how it looks.
Okay, RX15.
Oh, okay.
And then if I do RY90, then it rotates. And then Z. I'm like, what's the other letter? Yeah, so you can type X, Y, or Z.
Okay. So X, Y, Z is the axis we want to rotate.
If you want to be specific.
And then the degree. how many degree we
So
want
if I
to turn?
do G X5, it'll move 5 units.
Oh, okay.
So you could do that with G as well, or for S.
G stand
G as
for what?
in Gary. I need to learn the military ones, but I don't know. Sorry. G as in Gary.
Okay, G for stand for move, right?
Yes, or grab.
Okay. Oh, grab.
That's an easier way to use. In every other program it's move, but in Blender it's grab.
Mm-hmm.
So, does anybody else have any questions? I thought I heard another voice.
Yeah, my question was, is it R plus, you're holding it, or it's just sequence of keys in a row?
Yeah, sequence of keys. You don't have to hold down R.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Any other questions? Okay, so we're in the front orthographic, so that was 1. And I'm using the front of the chair as my reference image. And we see this blue line, so I'm going to try to eyeball it and move the chair to the middle. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but you just can get as close as you can. And I'm going to actually select both of these because I want the bottom of my chair to be at the floor. And so I want to actually move these up and try to eyeball, obviously, because there's like some sort of perspective in the reference image, you can't perfectly do this, but just pick one of the legs and get it as close as possible. So I've centered the front of the chair with this Z and moved it up to be flush with X. And then if I press 3 for the side, I'm just going to select this one image because before I had both of them selected, so make sure you deselect the other one. And I'm going to move this over and just kind of eyeball it to see if it's in the center. And, that's good enough. So, another tip, Blender kind of hides the locking of things. So if you want to make sure that you don't touch this reference image or accidentally move it, you can lock the position of it. And so something that we have to do naturally, if we're over on the right side in this outliner, we default to the program, we can see the camera, which is whether your object will render or not. And then on the eyeball is whether you can see it in the viewport or not. So if you turn off this eyeball, it'll still render because your camera icon is still on. So don't think because you turn it off in the viewport that it's not going to render. You have to turn off both of these things. But those are the two things that are default. But if we go up here to this funnel icon and click the drop down, we have more options that we can show. And so this directional arrow right here, if we click that, you see if we hover over it, it says selectable. So we can click that. And now it's available in the outliner. So again, I'm in the top right in the outliner, this funnel icon at the top, it says filter. If you hover over it, I'm clicking the drop down and I just enable this directional arrow right here so that I can see it in the outliner. And so if you don't want something to move, you just make sure you select it to know which one it is. So it's this empty. And then I'm just going to click the directional arrow and now I can't move it. I can't click on it. I can't move it. And so I want to do that with both reference images. So I'm just going to click the other reference image and click the arrow for that too. So that's if you feel like maybe you'll accidentally mess something up or move your reference image and you just want to be totally sure that it's not going to move. That's something you can do.
That you isolate the object, right?
Yeah, so yes, okay. So the question mark on your keyboard, or it's actually the backslash, but it could be or maybe forward slash. This is why I say question mark. So the question mark button, if you select an object and then you press that, it isolates. And so everything else disappears. And then if you press it again, everything comes back. So again, that's the question mark button that's next to your shift button. All right. So let me kind of go through this. So I'm going to, I have a cube is a very good starting point for this cushion. And so I'm going to keep the default cube in there. And then right here, I showed you last week as the tip for like selecting things. I'm going to use the X-ray mode just because I like to see through my objects when I'm modeling, but also I like to see the wireframe. And so I pressed this button right here for the X-ray, and then to see the wireframe, yes, I can go over these two intersecting circles. I go to this drop down, and then under geometry, there's this wireframe, and I can just check that, and you can see the wireframe. And the preferences, you can change the color of it and all that stuff, but that's a personal preference, and you can figure that out on your own. I would suggest when you're modeling, right now we're in object mode. I would suggest that you go into edit mode because, for example, something I didn't go over in the video last week is this toolbar over here. The shortcut for that is T. So you can make that come and go. But there's another toolbar over here, and that shortcut is N as in Nancy. So N as in Nancy. And we can see currently, like if I start, let's see, let me duplicate this. So to duplicate, I'm going to do Shift D. And I'm not touching anything. I'm not clicking anything, so I can move it around. And if you, oh, I think I lost it. Okay. Well, if it's there, but I'm doing too much. So if you want to, I think if you can move it X, yes. So if you want to move it along a axis, you can Shift D and pick an axis and then click. So we can see the only the difference between these two objects is that this one is moved in the X axis a little bit. So if you start manipulating this in object mode, I'll show you if I start scaling it. I can move it up. So this is a key to production modeling is you're creating the form, and it's okay that this is not perfectly centered. It's totally fine. I'm just trying to keep it. I'm not gonna move this over. I would either uncheck this and move the reference image over a little bit, or I would just deal with it, to be honest.
What do
Can
you
we
call
give it a
the
dimension?
Okay, James?
yeah, what do you call the controls, the XYZ control? So when you want to
This
move
is a
something on
gizmo,
the gizmo.
but individual, like these are move, scale, and rotate. Or yeah, sorry.
When you want to rotate on the X-axis, and then you would use the X-axis control, and then if it's the Y, then you would use the Y-axis control.
Yeah, so
And
if I did
Z-axis.
rotate, if I want to rotate around the X-axis, I would use the red. I would hover over the red and rotate it like that.
I see. Okay.
Mhm.
That was something that I was looking into the last time when we were modeling.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
And William?
When we create the object, can we give it the dimension so it's exactly what we want, or we just eyeball it?
Yeah, you can do that over here. You can be more precise over here, but you can just eyeball it as well.
Okay.
It depends on how
So
your brain
if-
works.
Let's say that if we want to to create the object like a mattress with a 18 inches width and 6 by 16 inches length.
Mm-hmm.
How do we do that?
Okay, so if I do Shift A and bring in, I'm going to, so this is, you can go to add, or you can do Shift A, mesh, cube. And so I'm bringing in a cube, and you do not click anything. This is the key. Do not click anything, because Blender, like in other programs, you can kind of manipulate something after, but you just don't want to click on anything, because this thing will pop up on the bottom left, this add a cube dialog box, and then you can to be honest, like when you bring in a cube, it's gonna be all the sides be the same, so you can't be specific with it. You can be specific with your starting object. But I'll just show you. I'm gonna
it's
Control
a
Z.
2 m is in
2
meter
meters.
or
Yeah.
Oh,
And you can change your
can we
units.
change the unit into
Yeah.
inches? Okay.
Yeah, so edit
How do we?
preferences.
Okay, preference.
Let's see. Do-do-do-do. Input. It's somewhere.
System.
Or it might be somewhere different.
Maybe system. Yeah, right. No.
You can, I'm not remembering offhand right now, but I'll message you about it. But
Okay.
I just want to show you all, if you do Shift A and mesh and cube, if I click, then that goes away and it never comes back. And so that's why you don't want to click. You want to make sure to click that dialog box. And then if I want to delete this box that's down here, I'll press X to delete and delete. And then if I Shift A, mesh, cylinder, you can be more specific with you can, how many divisions do you have? So I can decrease this to 8. Or I can make the radius 0.5. So you can do better with a cylinder than you can do with a cube. I can make the depth 1.
Okay.
And then I can align it with the view. So in the fill, I can do a triangle Fran or nothing, which will create an Ngon. Or I mean, actually that will create a no cap, but then you can do the Ngon cap as well. So I just wanted to show y'all that right quick.
Ngon is mean that we can give it the how many edge if we want, right? Like a hexagon or octagon, something like that.
The Ngon will be the amount of edges that your divisions are. So I had 8 divisions, so it's an octagon.
Okay.
Or 32 gon. For the rest of, I only have like 17 minutes, so I do want to get through this, so I'll just hold off on questions for right now.
Okay.
But
Thank you for answering the question.
No problem. I'm going to scale this out a little bit, and so if I go to 3, oh wow, okay. Oh, okay, that's the other box. I'm like, what? Let me move this out the way so I can stop being confused. 3, and I can scale this out. I'll move it over, and you can do this with the hotkeys, or you can do this with these things. And so I just want to do this starting point, but if I move this back, let's see why. So if you manipulate in the object mode, you can see all of this stuff changed right here, the scale. But if I manipulate in edit mode, so I can either go up here to edit or tab into it. If you start to scale, let me actually just hide this, move this back over, and then tab into edit mode. So if I go to 1 and I just start scaling, move it up, scale outward, press 3, scale this way, move it over a little bit. And you know, something that once you become more experienced, like this chair leg right here, it's blocking your view. So you have to imagine, where does this thing stop? It doesn't necessarily stop right where this is. You have to think of a real chair. It'll probably stop a little bit further back. It probably won't stop all the way back here, but you have to imagine, like, where would it stop? So the reference images only give you but so much. You can sometimes use the front, but there's not enough information for the front, so you kind of take creative liberties. And then I can move this down. And so if I go back into object mode, all my scale is still 1, 1, 1, but if I bring the other cube back, all my scale is kind of off kilter. Now, once you get into more complex things, you'll want to zero your scale out. So you can do all the manipulation in object mode. You just it'll become, there are reasons you'll want to zero it out. You don't have to worry about it now. But if you did want to go back and freeze your transformations or freeze your scale or zero out or actually 1 out your scale, you would just go to object, apply, and scale, and then it would go back to 1, 1, 1. That's going to be relevant for other things, but I just want to show you the difference between manipulating in object mode versus edit mode. So I'm going to actually delete this one. And so what a lot of people do is that they'll go into edit mode. So we have our vertex mode, we have our edge mode, and our face mode, and we can do things to each component. A lot of people will go to edge mode, select this edge, and one of the tools that we are learning is the bevel tool, and that shortcut is Control B. And so you do Control B and you kind of click and drag. And if you have a 3-button mouse, you can scroll. And a lot of people do this. They add so many subdivisions because we are doing high poly modeling, but you don't have to do that. And I would advise you not to do that. You can, when you're modeling, you just can concentrate on the form. Like I would block all this stuff out first. So let me, in a hurry, if I shift A, make another cube, I can move this over, scale it, and I'm doing this in edit mode. I could bring this up. And I'm not gonna stop at the bottom. I'm just gonna kind of suppose that it would go a little bit further. Bring this down a little bit further. And then move it over. And you do all this before we're learning the edge loop tool. You would do all this before you add more edges because it's just easier to manipulate with less geometry. And then I'm gonna go to 3. And I'm just gonna choose, okay, I was doing the front edge, and so, or the front leg. So I'm gonna move this over, scale it in, and that over, that over. And so that is the basics. Oop. Oh yeah, because I didn't create this object yet, but that's why it's floating. So you create that leg, and something that you can do is you can mirror. So if I go over, I have my object selected, I can go to the modifiers tab over on the right, which is the wrench, the blue wrench, and I can select that and then add a modifier. Sorry, zoom is in the way for me. All right, add modifier, and under the generate column is mirror. And so luckily that worked. Sometimes it doesn't do that, but luckily that worked. It just mirrored over. And so if we go to 1, it pretty much, did what we wanted to do. Sometimes it doesn't do that. And so something you can do, if it kind of acts wonky and doesn't act, we're mirroring over the x-axis, so we can see it's mirroring over the x-axis. If we want to change that, we can mirror over the y-axis, or both at the same time. But I'm not going to do that because the back leg is longer. But you can do the y-axis, or you can do over the z-axis. But if that didn't properly do that, what you could do to fix it is Shift A, and I'm going to create this empty, and you can pick whatever empty you want. I'm sorry. But I just use plain axes, and that will always go to 0, 0, 0, and that's always what I want to probably duplicate over, at least right now. And so if I select my object, we can choose a mirror object, and so I can, find the empty over here in the drop down, or I can choose the eyedropper and hover over this empty. And so now it doesn't look like it changed, but it's mirroring over the empty. And so if anything ever goes wrong, and maybe if you manipulated things in object mode, it might not act right. And so you can do that as an alternative. Okay, I can do that. Really quickly, I just want to I saw the chat. Let me just add a cube, and I'm going to go into edit mode. Scale. And I'm going to actually keep these in line because, the back legs are up in the front view, but in reality, that's not how it's going to be. So I'm going to keep the bottom in line with more with my actual real leg. I'm going to move this up. Let me scale this a little bit more. And then I'm going to go to 3. Let's scale this in right here. I'm going to move this back. And so this obviously has a curve in it. And so a tool that we can use is the edge, the loop cut tool. And so that is, if we zoom in right quick, Control R, and you can see this faintly is a yellow line. And that is our loop cut. We can use our middle mouse wheel and create more. As you can see, there's 4. I can do 5. And when you click once, you can move it wherever you want. But if you double click, it'll just kind of stay there. But if you accidentally move this after clicking once, you can just right click, and then it'll just perfectly be in the middle. And then this is what kind of 3D modeling is about pushing and pulling points. So you're not trying to create too much geometry. You're just trying to create enough geometry where you have shape. And then I can do the mirror tool again. And now I have my other leg. And so I showed you the bevel tool, but that's not actually how I would create the shape. I would actually, I'm selecting this object, tabbing in, I would Control R, I would create an edge, and I'm just estimating, what is the beginning of my curve, so to speak, and then Control R again. And where you have to strategically put your mouse where if you put it in the middle of here, then it'll be vertical. If you put it in the middle of here, then it'll be horizontal. So you have to kind of learn how to do that. And so I'll just create this. And then what I would do, I would select these and then move them. Because in hard, like in production modeling, I'm going to end up using a subdivision surface modifier. So I don't have to add all of this geometry. If I take this object as it is now, and then what I can do is add, if I go to the right, the modifiers tab, add a modifier, and then add a bevel. It adds a bevel to everything, to every edge. And then what you're usually going to do is do 2 segments. And maybe I don't want my bevel to be this thick. I can lessen the bevel to 0.05. So, and if I might not want the bevel to be on this edge, I actually don't, because that will create too hard of an edge. So again, at the end of this, all of your objects should have a subdivision surface modifier. So I added a bevel modifier, and then I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier. Is it about to crash? Okay. So if I turn off X-ray, as you can see, and I'm going to turn off the wireframe, it's starting to bevel. Something when you want stuff to be smooth, obviously you have this subdivision surface modifier, but something you have to do is select your object, right click on it, and shade smooth. And sorry for going fast, but we only got a couple minutes. And so I don't actually want this harsh edge, so I can go back to the bevel modifier, and this angle right here, I can just increase the angle and see when does it go away. So see, because these are 90-degree angles, as long as it's not 90 degrees, the 90-degree angles will still have a bevel on it. But this this curve is more I went up to calculus, but we're not gonna go too mathy right now. But it's 73, and so I can get rid of that harsh bevel that was on a corner that I didn't want it to be on. And then, I can increase these subdivision levels. And so I wouldn't do the bevel that I did earlier. I would just, you don't have to use a lot of geometry to get the desired shape that you want.
I have a question on this.
Mhm.
I don't know if you'll cover this later on, but like when you're modeling, when you're creating a curve in like a 2D vector program, you can use the Bezier curve to
Yeah.
change the corner of a square, a rectangle into a rounded corner.
Yeah.
Would that be an easier way to do this, and still keep the number of vertices and the number of like vertex to a minimum?
So that is a
Yeah.
thought for low poly modeling. That's what a lot of YouTube tutorials are doing. They're trying to do low poly modeling or something like that. This is high poly modeling. So my concentration for this class is teaching what will be production for maybe TV film. Now, once you want to get into video game stuff, you can edit it for what your desired platform or whatever it is. But this class is going to be about high poly modeling. So with that thought, we don't worry about how many polys. We don't like. I'm not trying to create a bajillion. That's why I showed you not to do the bevel with like 22 subdivisions and instead do this. So this is what keeps the geometry lower, but you don't have to worry about, in this class, you don't have to worry about how much subdivision you have because it's high poly modeling. Now, when you desire to go to your own projects and do maybe video game modeling, you have to worry about that. But in this class, you don't have to.
What when you have a complex like environment with keeping the low polygon to a minimum, would that help in rendering?
Yeah, like a strategy you would use if the object is further away from the camera, if you have an environment, it would have, you probably wouldn't have a subdivision modifier on it. If it was closer to the camera, you probably have more detail. So that's a strategy you use.
I see. Thank you.
Just to quickly go over, again, all of your object, I would like all of your objects to have subdivision surface modifiers on it. And so you do have to manually add a subdivision surface modeler to every object. But if I do, sometimes when I grade students' work, they don't have this on there. So they're like, oh, this is the shape. So I did it. And then it's like, well, let me test it out. I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier. Nope, the shape is not kept. But you know what can keep the shape? A bevel. So if I add, and the order of these are important, so I'm going to add a bevel modifier, but it has to come before the subdivision surface modifier. So the bevel modifier right now is at the bottom. I'm going to move it up. And then I'm going to lessen it. I'm going to do maybe 0.02. I'm going to do 2 segments, and now your object is holding its shape. So if I grade your assignment and I'm going through, I will be adding, even if you don't add the subdivision surface modifier, I will. And then you'll get marked down for this. So make sure you're adding bevels. And make sure they're in the correct order. So I'm going to drag this up. I'm going to do 0.02 segment. And so you can do that. And really, I know this to end the class, but if you want to turn off these modifiers while you're modeling this camera icon on the modifier, I'm going to click the camera for that. Or is it the camera? Actually, that's the render. So the TV screen, sorry. So that's in the viewport. So the reason I wouldn't add the bevel in in the way that I added it earlier is because the front, from the front, this is curved. So I want as few I don't want that much geometry, so I can easily do the curve. So if I do Control R and do 2, I'm going to right click, and then let me go to the edges. And so I'm double clicking the edge to select the edge loop. And then I'm holding down shift so I can double click that one. And then I'm scaling it out. And if I want to add this curve, I can just manipulate my components. So I can bring this down. I can bring it in. And, I can, manipulate the back of that. Like also, a lot of people leave the back of their cushion like this. A manufacturer probably wouldn't do that. So I would grab this, scale it in, because that's probably how the real chair would look. And then if I tab into object mode and add these back on, now I would have to play around because I would have to play around with this because I would probably want this hard edge. So I'd have to figure out, how I'm it's kind of looking a little wonky right there. But that's why I wouldn't do the bevel with like the 32 edges, because now that makes it harder for me to make the front, the silhouette I want. And I'm doing this in a rush, so I can't really show you everything, but yeah, so when you do this cushion right here, just kind of have more softer profile. And really quickly, if anybody has to leave, I understand, but I'll just do this right quick. I'm gonna tab into edit mode and move this up. So if I scale, let me turn back on X-ray mode, scale this out. 3, I'm going to move this over, scale it in, and move this over a little bit. And so to create the shape, you just kind of want to create minimal edges. So I'm going to Control R to add my edge loops, and then maybe, add 3. And then Control R, I'm going to add 1 right here. And I right click just to make it go in the middle. And then I just select, because I'm in extrude mode, if I select these objects, or these vertices, it'll be selected on the other side. I can just manually, like, for some people, this is, you know, a peaceful experience. For some people, it's annoying, but you can just move, you just kind of move these vertices to the shape. So you don't need a lot of geometry. You just create the minimal geometry, because at the end of the day, you're adding a subdivision surface modifier and it'll smooth it for you. So it doesn't have to be perfect in this. You have to think of shape and form. And then in the front, Control R, let me just add, I'll just add 3. I'm going to, you know, all right, I want this to be at the top. I can select these. If I want to do these at the same time, I can select both of these.
Excuse me, Mr.
Mhm.
Anderson. So
Yes.
you type Control R and then you add 3 for
You use the scroll wheel to add more. If you do, you have a 3-button mouse.
you
Yeah.
type Control R.
Yeah, so I'll show you. Hold on. So I'm just moving these at the same time and making the shape. So again, Control R is the edge loop tool. If I do Control R and then just hover over, I can hover over here to do horizontal, hover over here to do vertical. And then without clicking, I roll up my scroll wheel and I can roll down.
Okay.
And then you can double click to lock it in, or Control R. If I lock it and then I moved it, then you right click just to be in the center. Or you can, if you purposely want to move it, let me see, Control Z, escape, Control Z, Control R. If I want to move it over here, then just click. So if you did it on purpose, that's fine. But I just created this basic shape and I might want, okay, I want a holding edge. This is a holding edge. It'll hold my shape. That's why it's called a holding edge. And I'll just move this over here. So now when I add a subdivision surface, I'm not going to add a bevel. I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier. Oops, I accidentally added a bevel. My brain did that. And so now, and I'm right click shade smooth. And so that is the shape that I am theoretically going for. I mean, I can scale it in a little bit. Escape. Let me tap into edit mode. Control A, or no, A. Select all. And sometimes you have to do that twice. And so I'll scale in just to do that. And so I didn't add a bevel, I just added holding edges. And so the closer to the edge you are, the more of a corner it'll be. If it's further, it'll be softer.